Es ist mir eine besondere Ehre, heute Abend an der Eröffnung dieser fantastischen Ausstellung teilnehmen zu dürfen. Sie zeigt einige bemerkenswerte Augenblicke in der Geschichte des Kalten Krieges und insbesondere in den Beziehungen unserer beiden Länder. Jahrzehntelang war Berlin ein Symbol für das universelle Streben nach Freiheit. Die Wörter von Präsident John F. Kennedy, "Ich bin ein Berliner", würden zum einprägsamsten Satz des Kalten Krieges. Heute ist diese großartige Stadt ein Symbol dafür, wie wir die Herausforderungen meistern können, die es für die Freiheit heute gibt. Es ist mir nicht nur eine Ehre, heute Abend hier zu sein, sondern auch eine besondere Freude. Präsident John F. Kennedy und all das, wofür er und seine Brüder stehen, hat mich bereits inspiriert, als ich noch ein kleiner Junge war. Die 3 Tage, die JFK im Juni 1963 in Deutschland verbracht hat und insbesondere die 9 Stunden in Berlin sind ein einzigartiger Teil von Kennedys Vermächtnis. Ulrich Mack, mit ihren Fotografien erwecken sie die Reise Kennedys nach Deutschland wieder zum Leben. Präsident Kennedy war ein Pionier des medialen Zeitalters. Er war der erste US-Präsident, der das neue Medium Fernsehen genutzt hat, um sich direkt an die Menschen in den Vereinigten Staaten und auf der ganzen Welt zu wenden. Aber die neuen Medien waren für ihn nicht nur Bilder, Impressionen und Schlagwörter. Er hat darüber hinaus ein Gefühl des Optimismus und der Entschlossenheit kommuniziert, das Generationen von Amerikanern geprägt hat. Seine Reise nach Deutschland und wieder ganz besonders nach Berlin hatte hier dieselbe Wirkung. Dieser Enthusiasmus und diese Leidenschaft machen diese Bilder so besonders. Wie ich bereits gesagt habe, Herr Mack, fantastisch. Meinen Glückwunsch. Ich gratuliere aber auch Hans-Michel Kötzel, dem Kurator der Ausstellung, und Gisela Kaiser vom Willy Brandt Haus. Ausgezeichnete Arbeit. Wo ist Gisela? This exhibit proves why President Kennedy's visit to Berlin in June of 1963 was the right thing to do. Some of his advisors said that a stop in Berlin would be a provocation to the governments of the GDR and the Soviet Union. But the old Berlin hands, men like General Lucius D. Clay, who you saw, or John McCloy and Shepard Stone, said that the president could not go to Germany without going to Berlin, and how right they were. Lieber Egon Bahr, ich weiß, dass Bürgermeister Willy Brandt genauso von der Bedeutung eines Berlin-Besuchs überzeugt war. Als Sprecher des Berliner Senats und des regierenden Bürgermeisters Brandt hatten Sie einzigartige Einblicke in diese Zeit der deutsch-amerikanischen Partnerschaft. Ich freue mich auf Ihre Anmerkungen. But as Ulrich Mack's photographs so vividly show, there were literally thousands of Zeitzeugen in Berlin that day. Each and every one of the Berliners pictured here and in that video felt that President Kennedy was there for them. Initially, the visit to Germany had been described as an informal working visit between leaders, but it was much more than that. Wie Bürgermeister Willy Brandt selbst sagte, Zitat, wir grüßen nicht nur das Amt, wir grüßen auch den Mann. Oh. That was the same way that President Kennedy greeted Berliners, as proud men and women. As I said earlier, his advisors had been concerned that the visit could be seen as a provocation. They counseled the president to be careful in his choice of words. The president, for his part, was also concerned about what he should say and how he should say it, but for different reasons. He wanted the people of Berlin to know that America understood what they were going through. As you can imagine, there were a number of drafts of the various speeches he would be delivering in Germany. President Kennedy wanted to include some German in his remarks. Some standard openings and closings were suggested. These are very familiar to me, by the way. Things like, es ist mir eine Ehre, Ihre Stadt zu besuchen. I think I've said that 300 or 400 times myself in Germany. Oder, ich freue mich sehr, hier sein zu können. He practiced these phrases, but he wasn't satisfied. He didn't think they were dramatic or meaningful enough. By the way, his German teachers weren't satisfied either. But here too, for other reasons. They thought his pronunciation was terrible, and they recommended that he keep his German to a minimum. Ich habe dasselbe Problem mit meinen Deutschlehrerinnen. They came up with a very short conclusion for his remarks in Köln. Kölle alaf. It was written into his text. The president added some handwritten phonetics so that he got it right. You can see I do a little bit of that as well. Die Kölner waren begeistert. For the speech at the Schöneberger Rathaus in Berlin, it was a bit more complicated. There are a number of variations on the story of how Ich bin ein Berliner, which is without a doubt one of the most well-known phrases from any speech in history, how that made it in the president's remarks. To that end, by the way, in a letter to Willy Brandt in 1964, Jacqueline Kennedy remarked, quote, how strange it is that the words of my husband that will be remembered most were words he did not even say in his own language. Zitat Ende. Both President Kennedy and his brother Bobby, who was his attorney general, often quoted excerpts from the classics, although people don't remember either of them for their Latin. The president, for example, had referred to the phrase civis Romanus sum in previous speeches to the people of American cities. He thought it belonged in his speech to the people of Berlin, and it was indeed a part of his prepared text. The famous phrase, however, in German, Ich bin ein Berliner, was not. It was handwritten on a cue card. I want you to know I brought this with me tonight. This is a facsimile. You've all seen this before. But to give you an idea of what I think of this speech, it sits on my desk every single day in my office in the American Embassy. And by the way, it not only says Ich bin ein Berliner, it says civis Romanus sum right underneath. He practiced the phrase with his interpreter in Mayor Brandt's office just before he went out in the balcony of the Rathaus to deliver his remarks. He felt compelled to make this statement in German to his German audience. Why? Because he had been moved and saddened when he saw the wall. Two women apparently waved to him from a window on the other side. He asked one of his hosts if that was a dangerous thing to do. Yes, Mr. President, he was told. But the president had also been moved and filled with hope as he drove, and as we saw tonight, through the streets of West Berlin. In his photographs, Ulrich Mack captured both the deep sadness and the enormous joy of both types of encounters. I should tell you, I told you briefly, I got the book with these pictures last weekend and spent 2 hours looking through there, and they're fantastic. When he left the city that night, Kennedy was still overcome by emotion. Looking out the plane window, he said, and I quote the president, "We'll never have another day like this one as long as we live." End of quote. Tragically, President Kennedy did not, in fact, live much longer. He was assassinated almost exactly 5 months later. His words, however, still ring through the streets of Berlin, west and east. There is still a sense of hope and optimism in this city that is very much a part of his legacy. He called upon the young and the old alike to give of themselves for their fellow citizens. He believed that each one of us can make a difference and that each one of us should try to do just that. Das hat uns die Stadt Berlin gezeigt. Die Mauer, die für die ganze Welt eine Herausforderung darstellte, als Präsident Kennedy damals an diesem Tag im Juni 1963 Berlin besuchte, fiel. Warum? Weil genug Menschen überzeugt waren, dass sie fallen muss. Dies ist nicht Teil des Vermächtnisses eines einzelnen Stadtmannes. Es ist das Vermächtnis all jener, die bis heute sagen, und hier möchte ich die berühmten Wörter Kennedys zitieren, I take pride in the words, ich bin ein Berliner. Und vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.